The Tacoma has been an incredible truck since it first came out, but what about this new generation? I was actually pretty surprised by this truck. In this video, I'll give you my honest feedback about this 2024 Toyota Tacoma Limited, as well as some issues I encountered while driving it. I've been driving Toyota vehicles for years and currently own a second generation Tundra. I've also spent a lot of time driving the previous generation Tacoma, as well as the latest Tundra and Sequoia. Additionally, I've tested trucks from Ford, GM, and Ram. Even though I currently own a Toyota and have been a fan of their past vehicles, I'm not biased and will tell you exactly how I see it. This isn't a 20-year, 300,000-mile review, but the truck hasn't been out that long. Long term is a relative term, so while I haven't been driving the 2024 Tacoma for decades to report to you, I did drive it every day for about 1 month, which is much longer than most people posting reviews, who might have had them from anywhere from an hour to as much as a week. Secondly, this truck was a rental, and I was in no way compensated or obligated to say nice things about it. Even though I can't report on the long-term reliability, I did notice some issues. They did a great job with the exterior styling, which has much better proportions than the last one. It looks like a smaller version of the Tundra, but better, with a grille that's a better fit for the front end. Remove the front wind deflector on the bottom of the bumper that looks ridiculous, and you have a really nice looking truck. Ergonomically speaking, this Tacoma interior is much better than before. The truck feels larger up front, and the seats are miles better than before. The last generation had flat seats that made it extremely difficult for taller drivers to get comfortable. There are plenty of adjustments in this limited trim, with plenty of thigh adjustments and lumbar support. I do wish they were softer, and the hardness seems to be exacerbated by the Softex upholstery, which is nice but not the most plush material. The interior is obviously much more up-to-date with a larger screen, nice materials, and a more appealing design. Honestly, this feels a lot like a Tundra when you're seated behind the wheel. If you're going to use the back seat regularly, you're going to want to look elsewhere. It's unfortunate to have to move up to a full-size truck just for that one thing, but this back seat is very small, which is typical of a mid-sized truck. It works in a pinch, but it's not the kind of ideal family vehicle people usually go for when they buy full-size trucks. I was happy with the overall quality of the interior. There's a lot of plastic, but the panels feel solid and well built. It also has a nice design that's modern and comfortable. This truck has the iForce Max powertrain, 4-cylinder turbo with 326 horsepower and 465 pound-feet of torque. The most common engine choice is a non-hybrid turbo 4-cylinder with 270 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque, but the entry-level models come with a turbo 4-cylinder putting out just 228 horsepower and 243 pound-feet of torque. A 6-speed manual is an option, but most trucks are going to come with an 8-speed transmission. The around-town drivability of this powertrain is night and day difference compared to the 3.5-liter V6. It has so much instant torque, which makes merging and keeping pace with stop-and-go traffic effortless. The electric motor gives an instant torque push, and the turbo engine produces most of its torque extremely low in the rev range. Max torque comes on at an insanely low 1700 RPM, which is like a diesel, so the pulling power is pretty amazing. However, full throttle acceleration isn't very impressive at all, but that's no surprise. Turbo engines, just like diesels, are torque monsters, but generally aren't going to win any races. The 0 to 60 time is about 7 seconds, which is slightly quicker than the last one, but judging by the initial torque, you'd expect sub 6 seconds. Many people are reluctant to buy a turbo 4-cylinder as opposed to a naturally aspirated V6, and understandably so. Putting reliability aside, this engine performs much better than the V6 in my opinion. It does have a little bit of 4-cylinder rasp, but it's extremely quiet, unlike the previous generation V6, so the 4-cylinder rasp isn't that noticeable. It's overall extremely smooth, but you do notice that 4-cylinder vibration occasionally. The low-end torque is a huge improvement. It really makes such a big difference during everyday driving. Many people complained about the 3.5-liter V6, which had 278 horsepower and 265 pound-feet of torque, being sluggish and underpowered, and while I don't necessarily feel that way completely, this engine has more than enough power to hold speed up hills, power through traffic without downshifting, and pull trailers at a reasonable RPM. For comparison, the V6 didn't make its max horsepower and torque until 6,000 RPM and 4,600 RPM. That's pretty high up there, and while it does make power, it's not really accessible for everyday situations. The driving experience is way better than it used to be. The handling feels smoother and more controlled, making it easier to drive. Honestly, it feels more like driving a big car than a truck. The quiet cabin and overall comfort really stand out. It's easy to forget you're in a truck. Whether you're on the highway or just running around town, it's comfortable, quiet, and just a lot more enjoyable to drive overall. I didn't do any towing, but have no doubt that this would pull extremely well. It can tow up to 6,400 pounds, which interestingly is less than the maximum 6,800 pounds of the last generation. With the low-end torque, this powertrain would have no problems at all keeping that amount of weight moving on the highway. I averaged about 20 miles per gallon while I had the truck, mostly driving in stop-and-go traffic around town. Considering my heavy foot on the pedal, that's actually not that bad. It's worth noting that the iForce Max is built for power, not fuel efficiency. A lot of people assume hybrids, like this one, should deliver much better gas mileage, but it's not designed with the same fuel-saving focus as something like a Prius. The rear seatbelt alarm would constantly go off, mistaking that there were people there not wearing their seatbelt. The alarm for the middle seat would beep, sensing someone there when there's only someone on the outboard seat. I would end up just buckling the middle seat to turn the beeping off. This type of safety feature is a nice bonus, and it makes it easy to see if kids are buckled up, but it's not much good if it's constantly providing false readings and beeping unnecessarily. An alert kept popping up on the gauge cluster saying "Trailer detected, trailer driving assist active" every time I started the truck. Obviously there was no trailer and nothing was plugged into the truck, so I have no idea what that was all about, but it was extremely annoying and honestly not surprising. The new Tundras have these types of odd electronic issues too. I'd skip the power running boards. Sure, it's nice that you can turn them on and off, but they're not really needed on a truck this size. They stick out pretty far and drop down low, which might make sense on a huge truck where getting in and out is tough, but for something like this, it feels completely unnecessary. Honestly, I don't get why Toyota even adds power running boards to the 4Runner, Tacoma, or GX550, other than the fact that they charge extra for them. They just don't seem like a necessary feature for these vehicles. Personally, I'd go for the non-hybrid powertrain. While the iForce Max is smooth and powerful, the engine constantly turning on and off is extremely annoying. It's smooth when it starts up, but it's noticeable to the driver and the passengers, and I find the engine shutting off on flat roads and then restarting just a few seconds later. The whirring hybrid noise when backing up or driving through parking lots isn't a sound that should be coming from a pickup truck. You do get a small amount of instant response from the electric motor when you step on the gas, but it's only making a little bit of power on its own, so it only assists in immediate acceleration. The iForce Max adds approximately 400 pounds to the weight of the truck, which is almost 10%. The added weight is like driving around with 2 to 3 additional people in the truck, which makes a difference when it comes to handling and braking. You're lugging around a bunch of extra weight. You do get more power, but when both are considered, the performance gains are negligible, aside from the small amount of instant torque. With pretty much everything on this Tacoma being brand new, including the engine, many people are concerned about its long-term reliability. Turbo engines generally aren't as reliable as naturally aspirated alternatives. It's a smaller engine producing more power. They're more complex with more moving parts, and they generate more heat, resulting in more wear. But it's not like Toyota just threw a turbo on an engine designed to run naturally aspirated. They're designing the engines from the bottom up to run with forced induction, so in theory, the components are more robust. Turbo engines have been around for many, many years, and it's the furthest thing from new technology. They're also used in many of the most reliable engines in the world, mostly in commercial applications, albeit they're mostly diesel. The technology is there to make these engines last a long time. The question should be, are they engineering them to last as long as they once did? If Toyota did their homework and put the same research and development as they have in previous decades, this powertrain should be just as reliable. Toyota is using the same powertrain in several of its vehicles, like the Highlander and Lexus RX, so if it turns out to be unreliable, it would cause some serious issues with the brand. There have been some transmission problems, which Toyota has addressed through a TSB. However, these problems don't appear to be widespread and are likely tied to it being a completely redesigned model. This limited iForce Max is about $58,000, which is $3,700 more than the non-hybrid limited, which is obviously pretty pricey. But I'd imagine most people are going to get something like the SR5, which costs somewhere in the low to mid-40s. But if you're looking for a TRD off-road package with soft-tech seats, then you're going to be back into the low 50s. This new Tacoma is a nice mid-sized truck if that's what you're looking for. The driving experience is much better than before, and Toyota seems to have addressed the complaints they were getting about the last generation. We'll see how they hold up in the coming years, and if they're as long-lasting as before.